Hey everybody, it's Inside the Game with Coach Jim and Coach John Blomstrann. We got two great guests tonight. We're gonna have a really good show. We got Dave Farrell and Rick Derella of Oakwood fame. And thanks so much, guys, for coming on.
Thank you, guys.
We were just talking about some of the old days that aren't going to make it on the show, but it was some good times for sure. So I want to introduce Dave first. Dave's one of the co-founders of Oakwood Soccer Club, and he's the coaching director. Yeah, it's on. And he's in the Connecticut Soccer Hall of Fame. He's got his USSFA license. He's the head coach of the 2014 Development Academy. He's coached Golden Boot winners, coached 9 MLS players. He's won 4 indoor national championships. He's a former Region 1 ODP staff coach and former professional player for the Cleveland Cobras indoors and former assistant coach at University of Akron. And you know, I could go on for 20 minutes, all the other stuff Dave's done, but that just gives you an idea of the vast experience and expertise that he has. And then now John's going to introduce Rick for us.
It's my pleasure to introduce Rick Derella. A lot of this resume sounds the same because these guys have been partners and really pioneers of the best soccer club in Connecticut for years. Dave is a co-founder of Oakwood Soccer Club and technical director. 2003 Connecticut Soccer Hall of Fame inductee. He's also on the board of directors of the Connecticut Soccer Hall of Fame. He got a U.S. Soccer Academy Director's Course diploma, which is a pretty recent phenomenon. 4 indoor national championships, FIFA World Cup players, Ellie Jean and Rick Kozak. He coached the Adidas ESPA Golden Boot winner, Riley Houle. 9 MLS players went through the club, currently Mason Stajuhar and Ben Mines. Former Connecticut Olympic Development Director and an all Ivy League player in 1977 at Cornell University. So thanks for coming, Dave.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we start with a couple of questions, I just want to say that, you know, everybody in New England and even around the country knows about Oakwood, what a great club it is. Before it was a soccer club, Oakwood Sports Center was the only indoor place to play soccer back in the 1980 or late 70s, early 80s. We played in high school gyms, yeah, but this was a place where you could have leagues and tournaments and whatnot, and it was amazing back then. We're just talking about the Friday night men's league, which we all played in, and the quality of that league was phenomenal. Teams and players came from all over New England and the New York metro area would come up on a Friday night and play, and the games were fantastic. I thought about a lot about Oakwood this week, and that's probably my fondest memory. I was still able to play then a little bit, and boy, we had some great times. Dave, one of the questions we want to ask is, and take this anywhere you want to go with it. What advice would you give to a young player who wants to be a good player? You've coached guys that have made it all the way to the top, and what are some of the things they did, and what are some of the things you're doing now with players that would help them get there?
Well, before I say that, Jimmy, I'm gonna add on to your Friday night league thought there at Oakwood. When I got married on a Saturday, I had my whole entourage from the wedding leave the rehearsal dinner to come play against Ludlow on that
Nice.
night. And my mother-in-law couldn't understand it. And she hosted at her house, and half the people left to come to the game. So it was, you're right. It had a draw, and it was a special night of the week for everybody, I think. It was enjoyable. I say to a young player, and when you start with the very youngest, is they're growing up in a society of highlights. Nobody's really sitting down and watching a full sports contest or of anything. It's the 10 best moments in sports, the top 10. You got the seventh inning stretch. You got girls on the sidelines cheerleading. You have full menu items when you want to go get something to eat at the stadiums. It's crazy. There's so many distractions, whether it's highlights, whether it's the way we watch sports now or participate as a fan. If you go to a Barcelona game, you don't leave your seat. And when you go to get something to eat at halftime, you're racing to get one of the 3 menu items offered and getting back and watching the game. So it's a different society the kids are growing up in right now. And I think they need to enjoy the game, but also understand the discipline that it takes to have those special moments. It takes training, and it's not a highlight film. There's no silver bullet for becoming better. And then as they get a little older, you'll know how much you really love the game, not by the enjoyment you get out of it, but by the things you sacrifice to play it. You put your driver's license on hold. You're not going to your prom. You're not getting a part-time job. So I think when you really decide, when you really want something, it's the other things that are kicked aside that show how strong the strength is for that. And that's what I would tell the kids as they go through.
Thank you, Dave. Before we move on, I want to read this comment from Dave Latourette. It says, "Hi, Rick and Dave. Great to see you both. Jim, don't let Dave take this thing off the rails." And for those of you that know Dave, you know he's a fantastic coach, but he also could have made a career in stand-up comedy. He's a funny guy. So I don't want to put any pressure on you there, Dave, but we're expecting at least one good one.
No worries.
But I don't want to have to hit the censor button either, So okay, John.
All right, Rick. I mean, same thing. You've coached so many good players, so many sort of memories in Connecticut with top-notch players through your club. Advice you would give, any age from 6-year-olds to 14-year-olds now about what they can do to sort of try to get to the next level?
Well, it's interesting that with the pandemic and social distancing and self-training coming in vogue, that what we experienced as youth players, we didn't really have that many friends that wanted to play soccer in the beginning, middle school and early in high school. And so you had to put the time in with the ball, and you developed a relationship with the ball. The most important thing is that you have a mastery, and that you put the time in so that you build that relationship so that you're proficient and you can become a reasonably good player if you work with the ball. It's pretty simple. And we've been the last 9 months expressing those thoughts to all the Oakwood players. And it was interesting back in March when the dads were building kickboards for their kids because everybody was in lockdown. And it brought back memories of days I remember kicking the ball against a cement wall by myself, putting the time in just to build a relationship with the ball. I think the other thing is that nowadays, as Dave is mentioning, there's so many choices between clubs and levels of play that you should seek the highest level that you want to be at and try to make it. And of course, you've got to have fun and enjoy the game because there's a lot of exterior or outside pressure. We like at Oakwood, we like to enjoy the positive pressure. Like we're the small fish in the big sea. So if we get to play a game against Red Bull or against the Revs, like that's our moment. Like that's what we're here for. We want to do that. So enjoy the game, have fun, but put the time in and have a relationship with the ball.
Thanks.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
Would you guys mind kind of taking us through a timeline of what it was like at the club when you first started it, and what the maybe the number of teams in the league, and how things have progressed, and you mentioned a minute ago, Rick, about the different leagues and levels that teams and kids can play at. What was it like when you first started the Oakwood Club?
Well, people don't realize that we didn't have outdoor teams until, I believe, 1989. So we actually only had indoor teams from around 1981 till 1989 for like 8 years before we were allowed to play as part of the Connecticut Junior Soccer Association. But Oakwood was a tennis club that was leased by the professional team, the Hartford Hellions, and I was hired by the professional team to start using the facility as a community outlet to start leagues. So like we started with like 4 co-ed teams and a bunch of men's teams and youth teams, but we only had 1 field. So there wasn't, the inventory of games wasn't that great. In 1985, we converted 2 more tennis courts. So we had 2 fields, and then we did a little bit more. And then in 1990, all the tennis courts were gone, and we had the full complement of what we have now at Oakwood. We actually have 4 indoor fields, but that allowed us to do all the different ages and different levels for men's leagues, et cetera. Back then there wasn't as many indoor facilities, so people were willing to travel. In the men's league, you talk about teams were coming from Ludlow, teams were coming from Westport, a lot of pro players that at that juncture, the NASL was still playing, and the indoor pro league was just really up and coming. What happened with the Hellions is that the owner, he had some problems. I think he went to jail eventually, but he ended up selling the club, and it was moved to Memphis. And so the field stayed behind, and at that point, we found out that the Hellions never even paid for the dasher boards, nor the rent at Oakwood. So the people at Oakwood, the tennis family, which was the Ritter family, George Ritter and Tommy Ritter was the Speaker of the House. And they also supported soccer, and they liked our vision. And eventually in 2000, Dave and I bought the Oakwood indoor facility from the Ritter family. And then that allowed us to expand, and we built our outdoor complex in 2009. But the actual Oakwood Soccer Club really didn't start any formal play outdoors until like 1989. So it was a long journey. And in the beginning with the indoor teams, we used to do a lot. It was an interesting. We think it was good for cross training with the boards and the speed of play. It allowed a great outlet for the kids. I mean, it was a lot better than what I had when I was growing up. We had a shovel tennis court to play outside, or if we were lucky enough to get into Rockland Community College back in the day, we would do that. But it's been quite a journey.
Yeah, those first years, that first decade, it was such a godsend for all the kids and adults that loved to play, that normally kind of had to take the winter off, or like you said, try to get we used to play at this little tiny gym and on the West Hartford line at the Noah Webster School, and 3-a-side was crowded, and but we used to play there a couple nights a week. So it was just great to be able to go into a place like Oakwood and play. Dave, and I know Rick develops players too, but when I think of Dave Farrell, I think of a guy that really develops young players. And I know he enjoys working with young kids. Tell us a little bit about that, Dave, and what if that's changed over the years, or anything you want to talk about in that line.
I think beyond soccer, you got to find out the buttons that work. You got to know the kids, and I'll give you an example. On field 3, we ran something called preschool. And it was a movement education class, basically, for kids with a soccer ball. And there was a gentleman in there who's older now, and he played with our club. His name is Bobby Humphrey.
Oh, yeah.
probably the most competitive kid I've ever coached. And we get out there and we dribble through the cones, or we do some skipping, or how to run backwards. And then they'd play a game, which meant the ball was just out there and the kids were running around. And Bobby Humphrey always would ask, who won? I said, I'll tell you what, you got moves like a belly dancer in that dribbling today. That's pretty good, Bob. Okay? You did a great job today. I'll see you next week. So then we do a little passing. And at the end of passing, he goes, who won? After the game, I go, you know what? You put the eye right through the eye of the needle. You passed that ball. You were pinpoint accurate today. I said, you did some good stuff, buddy. I don't care who wins. I said, but the passing was great. Then we do receiving. So it's third day of class. At the end, he goes, who won? I go, Bobby, you got a pillow for a left foot. I go, you're receiving that ball so soft. I go, you know I don't care who wins. He stands up, and he doesn't look at me. He faces all the kids. He goes, I know he doesn't care who wins, but we care, don't we? It was pretty funny to see that kid, or the kid you got to motivate, or hasn't had that switch turned on yet. I mean, the mechanics of the game, everybody kind of knows. There's different methodology, but I think if you can engage the kids, and you just see different coaching styles that you steal from. So I had played soccer for a little over a year when I met Ricky at Ulster, and they didn't even want me on the team. I could juggle maybe 12 times, and it took the whole penalty area to keep the ball up. At the end of that season, we hitchhiked from New York City to Chicago and take a bus from there to get to a camp in Winona, Minnesota at St. Mary's. And the first guy I'm working with, where you do all the stations, you do defending, you do attacking, you do whatever it is, I'm with Bob Gansler.
Wow.
And I played soccer for about 18 months, and I'm working with this guy. And then I'm back with Visvari, who he couldn't coach in these times with the way he presents himself. I'm sitting on the sideline, and I'm watching the game, and there's a guy named Dragan Stosic dribbling just crazily, doesn't ever pass the balls. So he brings Dragan over, and he goes, sit down, son. Puts him on the field. He's not sitting on the bench. He sits on the field in front of Visvari's feet. He goes, sit down. He's there for 5 minutes. If you're a player and you're being treated like that, that feels like 20 minutes. Like you can't get up. The ball is coming right by him. It hits him once. He goes, sit down. So I'm watching this, and he goes to the kid, he goes, did the other team score, Dragan? He goes, no, coach. He goes, did we score, Dragan? He goes, no, coach. He goes, then you really make no difference. So it just, you take from a lot of different, you coach from what you know, and I think generally if you just like people and you like kids, you can enjoy a moment with a 7-year-old as much as you can with an 18-year-old, So.
Nice.
So I remember at the beginning, like Jim and I were still young enough to play. And one of the things you guys did with your older teenage teams is you put them into men's leagues, didn't you, to give them good competition? How did that go? Were you ever nervous that they were going to get the crap kicked out of them or anything? Or did that go pretty well in the early days?
Well, I mean, in the rest of the world, that's how it's played. Like, there's no real youth soccer. You try to get – it's like the corner league. There's one league.
Yeah.
And so we think that it's important that you play against adults, because the goal as soccer players is to be able to play adult-level soccer, not youth-level soccer. So I think it's something that's probably missing now, because our kids are playing less against the adults, but we have a different competition model now, so you really can't compare. But it went for the most part very, very well. It was a great experience for the young kids, especially indoors, because they could hang a lot easier, I think, with the familiarity of Oakwood, et cetera. And the games are short and fast, so it was competitive, and it was a great experience for like our high school kids to play against future and former pros.
So to add to that, the science in the game right now with periodization and nutrition and rest, we used to play our boys in the boys A tournament in the afternoon, and then we play in the men's A tournament at night, and we'd add like Bob Wasserman and myself to the team. And we're playing against, what was the guy, Ron? We put the teams together all the time. Ron Campos? What's his name?
Ron Campo.
Ron Campo. He had Paul Kitson. He had a bunch of players out there playing against. And he hated playing the kids because it was like us and them in the final all the time. And we'd already played like the youth tournament during the daytime. But now with the way that the science is, they would think that's horrifying, you know? When we just thought more was more, more is more, you know? So.
Yeah.
Well, there was not that many opportunities. That was the beginning of a plethora of opportunities for the players.
I think about it, John and Jimmy. You always had your boots in the car if the game broke out.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
That's the way it worked.
That's true.
Definitely. Before we move on, I just want to highlight something Dave said, because, and he said it so matter-of-factly, but that's what it was like back then. Him and Rick hitchhiked from New York to Chicago and then found their way to Minnesota or Michigan or whatever it was.
Jimmy, not to interrupt, but the reason that we had to do that, George Vizor said, you know, you guys want to work the camps in the summer? We said, yeah, we want to work the camps. And I mean, we didn't know who Bob Gansler was, but he was like one of the coaches there. And he said, well, we could pay you $50. So I got on the phone and I called Port Authority, Greyhound. They said it's $78 to get to Minnesota. So I was like, well, that's not going to work. So how are we going to do this? So I called up Greyhound again. I said, well, how much is it from Chicago? And they said it's $13. So we hitchhiked from the Garden State Parkway to Chicago to take a bus to do the camp so that it would be feasible.
Yeah.
So on the way there, we're in Western Pennsylvania, and a guy picks us up in a VW microbus. And he said he's going out to Las Vegas to be a dealer. He's a teacher. That's going to be his summer job. So he puts us in. He gets to Youngstown, and he's tired. So we're in a rest area. Ricky and I are sleeping on the picnic tables. He's got his American Tourister, and I got a backpack. And this guy's in his van sleeping. He can't sleep. We're out on the highway. It's 6:30 in the morning. There's like one truck going by like every 20 minutes. This guy comes back in his VW, the minivan, and he picks us up again. And he goes, I really didn't sleep that well last night. He goes, can any of you guys drive a Standard? I go, yeah, I can drive a Standard. So he goes in the back and he goes to sleep. So as we're driving on Route 80, I see the sign. I don't know if it's 91 or 90, whatever it is, 90, going north to Chicago. And I look over at Rick and I just go like this. The guy wakes up. We're bouncing along. We're in the south side of Chicago, off in the streets. And he wakes up. He goes, where are we? I go, I don't know. I lost Route 80 somehow. And he goes, get the hell out of my car. He's throwing our shit out of his car. The policeman comes by and he goes, what are you guys doing in the south side? What are you doing here? I go, we're trying to find the bus station. Get in the car. So he took us to a train that took us to the loop there in the middle of Chicago. That's when we got the bus for like $13.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what it was like back then.
I bought a car for $1, a station wagon. And Rick and I played for the Greeks in New York City. Okay. And the guy would pay us, and he owned a couple of gas stations. I said, don't pay me, just give me parts. So he gave me a windshield, carburetor, gave me brakes. My father and I put this station wagon together. And then we had like 6 guys that worked camp all in that car all summer, going to Louisiana, going to Michigan, going out to Minnesota. And everybody chipped in like $30 for insurance. So,
Diego Pesa was in that car.
that's right.
Yeah.
Played for USA.
We got a message here from Tony Orta saying missing playing against.
Yep. Tony was our goalkeeper a lot playing in those games.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Tony loved playing goalkeeper indoors because he was short and the goal was small, so it was good. It's funny, you talk about playing for the Greeks. We used to play for the Hellenic, and traveling was always an adventure, let's put it that way. And it was way before, GPS and cell phones and all that. So, Lenny Santiris was, okay, just follow me. Yeah, right. Before we even left Hartford, he'd already run 2 or 3 red lights, and we don't know whether he went north or south on the highway. And I think we're playing in Stamford, but it might be Stratford. We're not really sure, And so we told Lenny, hey, get a van so we can all go together. So he used to paint houses in the summer. So he brings a cargo van with folding chairs.
Oh, yeah.
So we're sitting in folding chairs in a cargo van that's like smells like turpentine. And every time he stops or turns, we go crashing into the walls. It's crazy stuff. Arnie Ramirez. Hi, Dave and Rick. Great stories.
Well,
Okay.
we used to go to Metropolitan Oval with Coach Rittenbacher with the whole team in one van like that.
Yeah.
And he had the drop cloths when he was a painter. And so when we go over the Tappan Zee Bridge and you had to go through the toll booth, he would make all of us would have to go underneath the drop cloths. There was too many people. It was 16 kids in there with no seats. Okay.
Wow.
One Monday night league, Lenny wanted to play with us, right? And if you ever played with Lenny, he's the problem solver. So if he thinks things are going great, he's up front trying to score goals. If it's not going well, he's going in the back, and he's going to start to manage the game. So at halftime, we were losing by 2 goals. And I'm sitting there, and he stands up, and he starts coaching everybody that's sitting down on the boards, getting a breather. So he gets done talking. Everybody looks over at me, and I go, what the hell are you listening to him for? He plays his bouzouki, and he coaches girls, man. And he started chasing me around the field.
Oh, boy. Well, let's move on before we get in trouble here. So, Rick, we've talked about, developing players and what a player needs. And everybody we've talked to has said pretty much the same thing in this. You got to master the ball. Billy Gazonis said it perfectly. He says either you master the ball or the ball masters you. And by the way, his book was fantastic. And he mentions you 3 or 4 times as what a good player you were at Cornell. And that's high praise because he has very high standards. So these guys are not only great coaches, they were both really good players. And you don't have to be a good player to be a good coach, but I think it helps because you know what the player's going through. So, Rick, what advice you guys have developed a ton of coaches, and what advice would you give, Rick, to a young coach who wants to not just wants to coach every Saturday, but wants to make a career out of it?
Well, a lot has changed, obviously. Back in when we were playing, there wasn't full-time coaching gigs. Now they have specialists. You could be an analyst, and we had a couple of our young coaches that moved on to MLS teams from Oakwood. One as an analyst at Philly Union. Another one is a goalkeeper instructor at Real Salt Lake MLS. But I think the most important thing is get on the licensing pathway really early while you have the time. The licenses have really changed a lot. It's not about passing or failing a topic at the end of a week. It's more about the holistic development of the players, which means outside of soccer that we treat them and try to develop them as human beings. And it really, coaching is social work. So it's really, really important, but also find a mentor. If you can find a mentor that you trust and believe in, get on the coaching pathways and follow the holistic approach. It's pretty simple.
That's great advice.
Dave, we'll take it a slightly different direction, which I'm sure you won't have trouble with, but you guys have been with so many coaches in your club of Oakwood over the time. Were there examples of like young players who became young coaches in your club who you just sort of saw had that special ability, and you sort of could predict almost that they would become pretty much a full-time coach as they progressed? I'm sure there were a few of those in your Oakwood history, right?
Yeah, I think they come out of 2 areas: the kids that just truly love the game, and then the kids that took hold of the game, or the leaders, are the ones that I see that go forward that way. But I think that passion comes at different times. That realization comes at different times. I didn't know I wanted to be a coach when I started to play, and I enjoyed the game. And a lot of us wanted to be in the college game back in the early 80s until you looked at it and go, wow, 80% of it's recruiting and, fundraising. And it's not a lot of soccer on the field. So in a way, we stayed in a very, very good place where we can be very close to the game and close to the players. And I think that helps have a relationship where they see that there are good relationships created out of the game. I think along Rick's line, the only thing I would add to what Rick said about advice to coaches is you serve two masters. You serve the passion for the game, and then usually you have a relationship with someone. You have a wife or a partner, whatever it is. I would encourage all coaches to have a balance of that. Because a lot of coaches, I think a lot of sports are divorced. They get divorced because it's consuming. And there's a little something wrong with us to care that much about one thing. and to keep that sanity, I think if you find the right partner, you'll be more successful. Somebody that has the buy-in and then can tell you to take a step back, or yeah, go ahead, do it, or doesn't feel threatened by what you do. It doesn't take away from what you have with them. And that's been a big part of my life. My wife has been very supportive, and she knew that when we were going out, it's not going to change. I'm not going to change. This is who I am. And it was maybe a fact that I got later in life that I was so immature early on in that side of my life that it was helpful that I got married later, that you realize that. So I think they're going to find their way. The kids that are really into it. And I think the leaders, they find a sense of success and gratitude in the game when they're looked up upon, they're looked up to. And I think the coaches like to be in that situation too. I think it dovetails into something like that where you can have an influence on someone in a positive way, whether it's on the field or off the field.
And I think the number of coaching positions have probably expanded through our time because, like you said, it used to be a college coach or a high school coach. Now there's a lot of full-time club coaching positions, right? That's sort of mushroomed over the years. Yeah.
Yep. It's evolved into a whole industry. Not just pioneers.
Yeah. That's a great point, Dave. I know, I've been a college coach basically my whole career, and it's funny. The biggest place I ever coached was University of Hartford, and there was very little coaching. It was all about recruiting and fundraising, and the fundraising piece got bigger and bigger and bigger as time went on there, because they slashed the soccer budget. And it really was a difficult job, and the couple hours I got to spend on the field were a godsend, but they were just 2 hours, out of 24. So, it's that's a great point. And the other point about, have a partner that understands. I joke, you guys all know her. She used to play at Oakwood. Dave, you coached her. Mm-hmm. And she knew all about my soccer, mania, and she had it too. And that's one of the reasons why we got along so well. And so I've been really lucky there. It's funny, the first couple of years I'd be going recruiting for the weekend. She'd go, "Oh, you got to go recruiting again." And by about the 5th year, she's like, "Don't you have to go recruiting again?" She was more like that. So it's worked out pretty good that way. But the club system. Well, we remember when there weren't clubs, and like Rick mentioned, the first 7 or 8 years of Oakwood, it wasn't a soccer club. It was, and then there was the big dilemma or argument between town teams, and can a kid from Mansfield go play with a bunch of kids from Glastonbury and Farmington? That's not fair, and now we don't think anything of it. But remember, that was a big deal at one time.
That's why we didn't have teams.
Yeah. What about your two perspectives of the United States Soccer Federation getting more involved, and sort of the evolution from a premier club to then academy club, right? That must have been a big change for you guys.
Yeah, it was a big commitment. We couldn't have done it without investing in our outdoor fields, because you have to be able to train 4 times a week and be committed to a 10-month season, which means you're not playing high school and you're going to play against pro academies. So it was a big we went from a small market club playing state cup to a small market club playing against MLS clubs. So
Wow.
it was a real challenge. U.S. soccer's taken a step back, obviously, with the demise of the DA, but MLS has taken over the league now. And you know, the evolution the last 10 years has really been about significant investment in the game on the youth level by MLS clubs and by clubs like Oakwood, who own their own facilities, can have a full-time staff, can have a 10-month season, and you have a real training plan. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that, you know, if Oakwood wanted to practice 2 or 3 times a week, we had to jump fences to get on a field, and get permits and hope that you know, the field wasn't taken by someone else. But those days have obviously been put behind us, and we try to do the best we can. And I think that our players are unique in that they're choosing not to play high school. They want to be prepared for college. Most of them are going to take the college route, and they think that that's the best preparation that they can get from us being together on a 10-month basis. The few lucky ones that are going pro, I know you had Lyle Yorks on the show a few weeks ago, and he'll tell you, like, he's the younger, the players that are signing pro now is getting younger and younger, which is affecting the college game also. MLS wants to sign teenagers. They don't want to sign players out of college. And the effort put forward by all these elite academies and the pro academies, you can see now the number of Americans playing in the top 6 European leagues is pretty impressive. It's changing. The value of the American player just in the last year and a half has mushroomed to the highest level it's ever been. And people don't realize that, you know, there were pioneers back in the day that were trying to play in Europe when we were playing college. Tommy Mulroy, he quit Ulster and he went and played in the NASL, and then he went to Germany and he went to Holland and tried to pick up on some of these professional teams. Players like Ronald Dufresne played in Reims in the 80s. I mean, even the UConn guys. Elvis played at Montpellier, I believe, in League One. People don't know that. That was like in the mid or early 80s.
It's pretty interesting to look at our development in this country, from the soccer educational aspect, the professional leagues, the amateur leagues. It's pretty diverse. And it'll be interesting to see at the pinnacle, when our league is matured, MLS has matured, are we a selling league? Are we a developmental league? Do certain clubs, like in other countries, you know, consider themselves a selling club or a championship club? I don't know when we'll get there. I mean, back in the day, you know, everybody put benchmarks when we were going to arrive. Oh, Pele's here. We've arrived. We're going to be a good soccer nation. You know, we have the MLS. Okay, we're going to arrive. We're still waiting, guys. You know, we're still waiting, and I don't know what direction that'll take us. It'll be interesting.
These other clubs, Barcelona, Italian clubs, they've been doing it professionally for over 100 years. Barcelona is now 120 years. So we've been doing it really MLS since 96, and NASL, in a way, it almost doesn't count, because the rule then was you had to have 4 Americans on the team. Well, so what? You have 4 Americans on the team. That means you got 18 foreigners on the team. And so the developmental piece wasn't really there. So I know in 96, when I started watching MLS, there were a lot of good players, but the defending I thought was horrendous, and I couldn't stand it, you know. And now I watch a lot of MLS. I watch a lot of overseas games, and there's a difference, but MLS is so much better now than it was then. And just look at our young players now on the national team. The guys that have gone straight to Europe and they're playing. The kids playing at Juventus. The kids are playing at Dortmund. It's unbelievable. I'm super excited about the direction things are going in.
I'd have to say another thing that's interesting is if you look at the phenomena politically around Atlanta with what's just happened, over the last week or so with the Democrats being elected, but then you look before the pandemic at that Atlanta MLS team, and they were playing in a football stadium, right? Without Pele or Beckenbauer or any of the people that used to come over to the the NASL way back. And didn't they average like 70,000 fans before the pandemic? That was really incredible in the South, I thought.
Well, they did, and they said that the crossover between the soccer fans and the Atlanta football team was only like 7%.
Yeah,
Wow.
so a whole different audience.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, that was amazing.
So, Dave, what do you see happening over the next bit of time, 5 years or so, for you, for Oakwood, for the game in your area there?
I think Rick and I will devise an exit strategy where we're still within the game. We still want to coach. We still think there's a value in that for us and for the kids. I won't be climbing on any scaffolding or changing light bulbs at Oakwood anymore. Those things are kind of, I hope, behind me. And I think now is the time to build even stronger relationships between the amateur elite clubs and the MLS clubs. There's got to be a pathway where they can find more talent, where the elite clubs are really doing the right things for that transition or getting the right players into the right spots. We had a company that U.S. Soccer Federation hired to come and evaluate us, called Double Pass, out of Belgium. And they evaluated the national teams, they evaluated MLS teams, and they evaluated a bunch of elite clubs, and we were chosen to be evaluated from that as well. And so let's give you an example. The guy just came from Man United, where they have 387 employees, and he's sitting in the bar at Oakwood. He goes, "Okay, who is in charge of physical plant? Who runs the leagues?" Rick, you can raise your hand there. Who does all the scheduling? Okay. Who coaches all the clinics? Like, we're raising our hand for everything. And he was shocked at the size of the club and what we do. And our lesson from that is we have a wider view of the world from what he's told us, and we can implement everything that really doesn't cost a lot of money and make some changes, and then build on that if expenses are incurred for things you really want to elevate the club with. I think the more elite clubs are on that pathway, I think we'll create more talent. I think we'll create more interest. And soccer will be more professional from the elite through, professional standing. And I mean, if you look at high schools down in Texas, they're getting 20,000 people for a football game on Friday night. When is that going to happen? When can we get 10,000 for a high school game? When is that interest going to occur? I think from my perspective, that's more realistic than winning the World Cup right now for us, if we can generate that kind of interest. If it's only 2 high school games a year, a semi and a final, whatever it is, and build on that. And that takes talent, and that takes organization. So I think that's where I would like to put my energies in the transition to try to get the elite clubs in a better alignment with the professional clubs.
Very nice. How about you, Rick?
Well, I think the trend is residency. You'll see probably up to 20, almost every MLS club is going to have residency for their academy. That's, I mean, they're going to be training full time, and when they go into residency, you know, most of the like Philadelphia Union, they have their own charter school as part of it. So the kids have special schedules. They're training twice a day, and it's going to put them more on a similar pattern to what we see in Europe. When I went to the Academy Directors course 2.5 years ago, we went to Bruges in Belgium, and the U13s at Bruges trained 13 times a week.
Wow.
Now that includes weights, right? They're doing double sessions some days it's weights. 13 times a week they meet. Wow. Okay, and that's a top club in Belgium, but it's not. You know, you never heard of it probably. I mean, it's not Juventus, it's not Ajax. It's a selling club, but realize that even the smaller clubs, the clubs that are like Oakwood over there, are doing similar things, and they're doing joint things where they have the support of the government in some cases, where some of those sessions are almost scouting for Bruges, where they bring in players that aren't playing for Bruges, and it keeps the Bruges staff busy, and they train them at like 2:00 in the afternoon, and it's only probably a 60-minute functional session for like 8 kids that are midfielders, and then at 5:00 they go to their regular training. So they haven't kind of figured it out, but soccer is pretty high on the totem pole in some of these countries.
Yeah.
So we still have a long way to go with that in terms of the culture, but I mean, there is a big soccer market, and I think a passionate fan base in the United States that's still growing, as Dave mentioned too. And you know, hopefully MLS will keep growing. You know, the pandemic is a real challenge for MLS. I mean, the commissioner said that I think they lost $1 billion, the league, with a B. So there's a lot at stake, a lot of invested.
Yeah.
And we'll see a bump with the World Cup, because U.S. and Canada are hosting not too far from now, right? 2026. Yep. And, you know, that happened a little bit. When was it? 84 or whatever it was. But
is it Mexico involved in that also?
What's that?
Canada, U.S., and Mexico, right?
Yeah, I think the model
We get 80% of the games will be in the U.S.
Yeah, 10 in Mexico, 10 in Canada, and 40 in the U.S., right? Including all the ones at the end. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And Giant Stadium was the final, I think, right?
I don't think they've declared any of that yet.
Oh, okay.
There's a lot of new stadiums that have been built since 1994, and Giant Stadium is one of the ones that's been ripped down and rebuilt.
Yeah.
You know.
Here's a message from Victor Santos. Nice to see Rick and Dave and how much they've done for soccer in Connecticut. And I tell you, my hats are off to you guys, because, you know, it's one thing to do a project for a few years or 5 years or 10 years, but you know, to do it as long and with the high quality and with very little help from, I mean, I know you had help, but you two were the main drivers for sure. And it's just phenomenal. I got a question for you about talking about the, you know, the elite clubs and the MLS clubs and the investment in youth. What's the money situation for a kid who is playing, say, for Red Bulls or Philadelphia Union? Does that kid's family have to pay for the kid to participate at that level, or how does that work?
No, almost all of the MLS academies are fully funded.
Okay.
There are a few that still have minor fees, okay. But they're pretty much all fully funded. Okay. So one of the things that's on the table now is the MLS clubs know that the top kids from Oakwood, if they're really going to try to be a pro, are probably going to go on to MLS academies at age 16 or 17. Is going to be a compensation agreement where there's a trickle-down effect. And I know that if players do go abroad, like a Pulisic type of thing, solidarity fees are going to be in play now going forward with U.S. soccer. So not that we're counting on that, because I think it's kind of winning the lottery. You know, our business model pre-pandemic, we do a lot of fundraising, and we found out that we're relying too much on the fundraising to keep us in the black, and that our dues were too low. Our dues are still lower than most of the Connecticut clubs, but it still costs about $3,000 a year to play for Oakwood.
Wow.
Without travel. So it's a big investment. But we think that we provide a pretty great value, and especially on a 10-month basis. So we're training probably up to 120 times a year, not including matches, and probably playing between 40 and 80 matches, depending on the age group.
Do you see yourself, and my apologies in advance if you just said this, because I shared with these guys, I'm deaf, and one of my hearing aids is crapped out. That's why I'm wearing these headphones tonight. But do you see yourself perhaps becoming, besides doing everything that you're already doing, being sort of not a selling club, because you're not selling them to the union, but for certain elite players that get their start with you? Has anyone ever moved to, say, Red Bull or Revolution, or do you see that happening in the future?
Oh, it happens all the time.
Yeah.
It happens at different stages, sometimes younger, older. I mean, currently, Ben Mines went from Oakwood to Red Bull, turned down Stanford, signed pro with Red Bull too, and now I think he just got traded to Cincinnati. We've had other kids that stay with Oakwood the entire time, like Danny Griffin. He played at Providence, and then he played with the Rebs U23, and now he's at Pittsburgh in the USL Championship. So it depends.
Yeah.
But I think residency is gonna make a separation where it's a really big investment, but that's only for the real elite kids that are on a pro pathway.
Yeah.
I
I think
we
the
had a
relationships. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Oh, sorry. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we had a player Nate Metzak, who played for you guys and then played for E.O. Smith when he was a junior. And then I think he went to the New England Revolution. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he was kind of it wasn't a normal trajectory because he was having problems getting on the field at Oakwood, and that's how he ended up at the Rebs. So it worked out. So
yeah. Dave, you're going to say something?
You have to remember, in the MLS clubs, it's like any other club, guys. You're going to have so many people in the percentage of being a pro, and then you have a supporting cast. So those kids are going college. Even if they're at Red Bull, maybe they're going to Georgetown. Maybe they're going to Stanford. Maybe they're going to Wake. And maybe 3 or 2 are going on to the first or second team. It's just how it works. So it's a big gamble for a lot of people to kind of put their eggs in that basket, but it's not as big when you have the fallback of a great university, maybe a scholarship somewhere.
Yeah.
So when you put that time in. So it's, how do you play that?
I wish that a lot of soccer parents and parent coaches and some non-parent coaches could have heard this, because you guys are fine with all the work you put in to your club and to players. I'm kind of feeling like when a kid moves on to one of the MLS, clubs, that you're okay with that. You're not saying, "Oh, I wish we could have kept him." Whereas you see at lower levels where a kid, this kid needs to move up. He's just not being challenged at this level, and there's people in his own club, own team, trying to hold him back so they can, win a couple more games that fall. It's tough to see that.
Yeah.
Just a shout out to Bobby Muse. I happen to be reading the MLS draft rounds in the paper. You guys probably followed it much closer than I did, but I swear there was 4 or 5 Wake Forest players drafted.
Oh yeah,
that's incredible. And
yeah,
he must have had quite a senior class. Well, maybe it wasn't even seniors. I don't know.
Well, I think it's the reputation. I mean, it goes back to even before Bobby with Vidovic was there, and they it's really a real pro environment.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gone down there in that training camps. We've watched them train. Bobby's been very helpful for us. We tend to go down there when we can in February for our second preseason.
Yeah.
you know. But it's interesting. The reputation of Wake has really skyrocketed in the last few years.
Yeah.
I was in Barcelona 2 or 3 years ago in March, and who do I see but the Wake team? I saw them all over town. I was talking to some of the guys, and they were playing Barcelona B and Atletico Madrid B and somebody else to a smaller club. But I mean, that's a pretty good spring break for a college team,
A little different than when we played.
Okay, we're just about out of time. I wish we had more time, but we don't. So, guys, thanks so much for coming on. It was a real eye opener for me. I haven't been in that world. I'm in a different soccer world, and the work you guys are doing is just fantastic. And I'm glad you're figuring out a way to stay in the game. Once you're finished doing this.
Thank you, guys. It was fun.
Thanks for having us, guys.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right.
Good night.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.